You know those shocking times on reality TV when not a word is spoken but the impact is still felt? This constituted those people. The steady, trustworthy, and long-term member of Parker Schnabel's crew, Chris Dumit, disappeared. Rick Ness, Parker's adversary, beckoned him away, not into thin air. He became engrossed in Parker's gold room at one point. The next thing he knew, he was donning an unfamiliar hard hat and getting into his work suit with Rick. A decade of undying devotion shattered in an instant. Chris was more than a cog in the wheel. During Parker's most extreme, muddy, and frigid breakdowns, he had stood by his side. He never left our side, whether we were experiencing record-breaking gold seasons or consecutive nights of sleeplessness. Glory was never his goal. Quietly, he moved about. He dutifully arrived, completed the task at hand, and maintained composure notwithstanding the tumultuous circumstances. As a young man, Chris worked as a carpenter for Todd Hoffman's crew, constructing a cottage. However, he grabbed a shovel and never let go of it after someone else failed to show up. A mining trip that no one could have foreseen began at that time. Chris became a part of Parker Schnabel's crew after Todd's squad broke up. Parker was a young man still finding his footing and making his mark in the industry. A crew that was frequently in a race against the clock benefited from Chris's wisdom and composure. Spans the entire day for Parker and the Hoffmans. The Hoffmans only ran for a few hours each day. Parker struck an aggressive pose. Rush, 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 rush. He progressed from being an employee to much more. Trusted, dependable, and esteemed, he became Parker's bedrock. Carrying paid dirt isn't the only thing that gold mining isn't. Making it through the monotony is the goal. More importantly, things evolved as Parker expanded his franchise. The original wash plant turned into a monstrosity with 3 heads. There are 3 enormous plants operating simultaneously, pushing continuously to reach progressively absurd goals. Chris remained in the gold room, the final destination of all things and the repository of all dig results. Each hour, each grueling shift is ultimately unveiled. However, all of a sudden, he wasn't merely addressing the cleanup of a single plant. Here he had 3. The workload, tension, and lack of breathing space were all multiplied by 3. Worse yet, the wash plants were quite far apart. Distance is a major factor here. It seemed like Chris was always hopping from one location to another, finishing one cleanup and then bouncing across bumpy roads to start another. There will be no breaks, assistance, or backup. As expected of him, Chris remained silent. Even if he didn't lose it or act out, something was changing. It might be detrimental to go all in right from the start, in my opinion. However, he is in charge, thus the outcome will be determined by him. A cry for assistance escaped him. Having another pair of hands is a relief. However, Parker, engrossed in figures and determined to increase production, did not decelerate. Assist never arrived. It was easy to understand. The people weren't considered. A golden hue adorned it. Chris's soul started to break apart, but his body continued to move. He continued to drive for hours, depleting his energy reserves, only to repeat the gruesome procedure. There is pressure, constant pressure. There is no time to eat, sleep, or think. When Chris lost it, it wasn't overly dramatic. A gradual deterioration. There was no explosion or spectacle. Something was off about his eyes. His gait is more measured. He appeared to be a man whose energy had been steadily dwindling for some time, yet he persisted in continuing due to habit. Not everyone could see the fissures either. Still, they showed up. Nevertheless, Chris made an effort to remain composed. Work becomes less important with time. Survival was the main focus. Something tragic occurred to Chris as he reflected about the years of service, the loyalty, the difficult shifts, and the dedication that was hardly recognized. Standing alone in that golden room, no matter how much he contributed, remained the same. The last shift subsequently arrived. A peaceful farewell to no one, with no yelling or fighting. Chris broke away from the only mining family he had known for 10 years, departed from Parker's claim, and teamed up with Rick Ness, who had been on the same team until he retreated, confronted his issues, and come back much stronger. Not much heraldry or revelry accompanied Rick Ness's return into the Klondike. His return exuded an air of mystery and trepidation. Long had he been absent, both from the presentation and the mining process. Rick had to deal with his own personal problems at that time. Wherever he ventured, that was exhausting. Many believed that to be the end. That Rick Ness, who had been Parker Schnabel's trusted assistant, had reached his breaking point and had finally burned out. Yet, they were mistaken. Rick returned as a different man than when he had gone. He had lost weight and was sharper, mentally as well as physically. He remained unbroken by the burden of his past. He had been honed by it. He returned not for the purpose of seeking glorification or to surpass Parker. For some reason, he decided not to return. He came back with a vision, which was more practical. A mining team that didn't merely labor but collaborated with the aim of creating something better and more intelligent. Moreover, Rick required human beings, not merely physical attributes, to populate a crew roster in order to materialize that idea. Believe in him. The man lacked the necessary expertise. Someone who wouldn't give in or make things worse was what he needed. It was Chris Doom that he needed. There was no financial incentive for Chris to take the plunge. Fancy gear or the allure of additional gold didn't sway him to move. Rick didn't like that. Actually, it required no more than a casual chat. Only one genuine, heartfelt interaction between people. Rick was forthright about the problem. He described it exactly as it was. Less staff, fewer resources, and a more compact organization. What he was providing, nevertheless, was also made crystal apparent. I was not at ease. Difficulty was high. It embodied honor. A second opportunity to take a deep breath. A location where you were valued more than your work. That meant the world to Chris, who had endured goal after goal of silence season after season. Extra cash wasn't necessary for him. His life lacked purpose. That was given to him by Rick. Nothing major happened, including a walk-off, confrontation, confession, or final goodbye. Chris failed to assemble the crew or seek out a final meeting with Parker. There was no note left at all. Suddenly, he vanished. Once upon a time, he was Parker's foundation, the one in charge of the gold, the one taming the chaos, and maintaining everything on course with the laser-like focus that comes from years of experience. When things went wrong, he became the one everyone else could rely on. Afterwards, he departed silently. There was no prior notice, no justification, and no caution. The Gold Rush fandom was rocked to its core when the news broke. The response was strong. A complete and utter eruption occurred. Friends and viewers of Chris's show for a long time were taken by surprise. This was no mere supporting cast member quitting the program. Chris Doom was this guy. He had an air of mystery and allure that captivated many. A number of his admirers quickly came to his aid, arguing that he should put himself first. Perhaps he deserved a fresh start after years of shouldering the burden of numerous wash plants with no respite. Their perspective was that he was regaining his serenity and prioritizing sanity above grind. However, not all individuals shared this view. Some were shocked, but others felt deceived. A person who had stuck by Parker through the good times and the bad could not possibly go, especially without saying farewell in their eyes. As far as they were concerned, it amounted to rejection, a subtle jab at the devotion Parker had always pretended to have. In spite of the schism, nevertheless, one fact stood out above the others. It was unexpected. This wasn't your average crew member changing sides. It was fantastic. The type of change that causes the ground beneath everyone still standing to tremble. It becomes personal for Parker when even a devoted man walks away silently. At that point, it's no longer about the gold. A warning is issued. Some people's backbones are stronger than others. There was no vacation while mining with Rick. Nothing was going to work out. It was still necessary to move the earth. It was still broken. The chill persisted, not to mention how taxing the labor was. However, a crucial aspect had altered. A mental and physical void had opened up. Though lengthy, the days were not interminable. The cleanups were challenging but not insurmountable. Chris felt human again as he looked around after a long absence. Rick did not keep a low profile, overseeing operations remotely. Right next to the team, he was there in the muck and mire. He was not a desk jockey. He took command right where it mattered. The little things he did, like checking in, smiling, and asking questions, meant more than any bonus could have. No longer was Chris a mere cog in the wheel. No one expected him to be a mindless automaton or to absorb the burden of personally overseeing a complete process. Once again, he was an integral part of a real team. Nobody made it seem like Rick's business was showy. Not a single bozer was left behind. Someone has to get under broken objects to fix them. There was no never-ending supply of backup plans or technical team waiting on call. It was honest and unfiltered. However, Chris had a sensation he hadn't had in a long time within that more challenging environment. Relief. He could relax and eat a meal without feeling guilty, and then clean up thoroughly without having to run to another emergency that was only a few miles away. It wasn't a race this time, but rather a rhythm. The system wasn't gobbling him up. The system was cooperating with him as he worked it. Upon returning to Parker Schnabel's camp, an unspoken change had taken place, as if there had been a subtle shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't only obvious that Chris Dumit wasn't there.